Hello, hello, hello. Good morning. Good morning to the Petty Politic, and I am your host. Uh, we're talking about election integrity in California, in integrity, period, about the elections that we have. We got Spencer Pratt and Donald Trump. And the question that seems to be coming up at every single election cycle is, if elections are rigged, why does it only seem to happen when somebody loses or the president's friends lose? Right? Here's the thing. We're living in an era of profound, and I mean profound, institutional exhaustion. You can feel it in the air, you can see it in the eyes of the neighbors, and you can track it on election cycles in our public discourse. Trusting the individual currency that holds a civilization together is in short supply. When it comes to the bedrock of our foundation, when it comes to the sacred act of casting a vote, we no longer have the luxury of aiming for a simple mathematic majority. We cannot afford the anxiety of the razor's edge. A tight finish is no longer just a close race. It's an invitation to a decade of litigation, skepticism, and division. That is why our objective cannot merely be to win. Winning by a hair's breadth leaves the door wide open for doubt. It leaves room for administrative errors, days late counting, securing the future. If we want to restore a semblance of undeniable legitimacy to the system of election, our triumph must be monumental. It must be so large. It must be so overwhelming. It must be, without apology, too big to rig. Think about what that phrase actually means. Too big to rig is not just a catchy political sign. It's a mathematical strategy. It's a psychological shield. It means building a movement so massive, mobilizing a voter base so historic, and turning out in numbers so undeniable that no amount of bureaucratic friction can prolong vote counting and no margin of error can possibly alter the outcome. California is the warning sign. That's the warning sign.
Don't believe the polls. The polls had us way up. Don't believe the polls. Too big to rig. We made it too big to rig. Just keep going. No matter what you see, go out and vote. And we made it too big to rig. Too big to rig. Don't believe the polls. The polls had us way up. Don't believe the polls. Too big to rig. We made it too big to rig. Just keep going. No matter what you see, go out and vote. And we made it too big to rig. Too big.
Look no further than what's happening right now on the West Coast to see exactly why we need an unassailable margin. Look at the California primary races. We're watching a textbook example of what happens when a race is left to the mercy of slow-rolling, days-long ballot counting, and it's driving the country into absolute fury. Take the Los Angeles mayoral race. You have Spencer Pratt, a political newcomer who built a massive anti-establishment wave of support after losing his own home to the devastating Palisades fire. On election night, he looks like he's secured a spot in the runoff. He thought he had. He had an 8-point lead. The energy is there. The momentum is real. But then what happens? Days go by, 5, 6 days after the ballots were cast. The numbers keep shifting in the dark. Suddenly, a batch of mail-in ballot drops and Spencer Pratt slips into third place behind Rahman and Mayor Karen Bass. And what is the immediate result? Absolute chaos and distrust. Donald Trump looks at the data and screams from the rooftop that it's rigged. That's a rigged election. Calling California a third world nation. That's wild. He looks at all the data and lags behind on the trackers and says there's no way a candidate drops like that without something corrupt happening behind the scenes. Meanwhile, election officials claim it's just the standard slow process of counting mail in ballots postmarked on time. Whether it's a statistical anomaly, a reporting glitch, or just California's notorious sluggish system, the damage to public trust is already done. Donald Trump has made the election process, he has tainted the election process. The moment a race relies on days of post-election counting to flip a lead, half the population believes the victory is stolen, and the other half believes the complaints are totally baseless. The system breaks down. We cannot keep running campaigns that allow our victories to be swallowed up by the slow-moving gears of states like California. So, now let's stop and look at the history, because we have to separate fear from fact, okay? If we're going to demand a victory that is too big to rig, we need to understand exactly what we're fighting against. Does America have a history of rigged elections? Yes, it does, but only on a local level. Let's not pretend our history is spotless. If you look at the 19th and 20th centuries, local political machines completely ran the show. We had Hall in New York stuffing ballot boxes. We had the notorious dukedom of Duval County in Texas, where Lyndon B. Johnson miraculously discovered 200 late votes in Box 13 after the 1948 Senate primary ended to win by a literal hair. We know that in 1960, the Daily Machine in Chicago and political bosses in Texas pulled strings in the shadows to tilt a razor-thin presidential race. Local corruption is a part of American history. It happens in the dark, it happens in tight corners, and it happens when a few powerful bosses control a city or a single county. But here is the million-dollar question. Is a rigged election possible on a national level today? The short answer, the definitive answer is no. And it's not because politicians suddenly become saints. It's because of the sheer chaotic and beautiful design of the American electoral process. The media and the cynics like to talk about the national election as if it's one giant machine run by a single computer in Washington, D.C. There's no such thing as a national election in the United States. We don't have one election. We have 50 separate state elections, which are actually broken down into more than 3,000 completely independent county elections. Think about the sheer logistics of trying to rig a modern national election. It's not possible. The decentralization paradox. To alter a national outcome, a conspiracy would have to secretly coordinate across dozens of different states, hundreds of different counties, using completely different voting machines, different paper ballot designs, and entirely different state laws. In almost every swing county in this country, the people running the precincts aren't faceless bureaucrats. They're your neighbors, they're bipartisan teams. You have Democrats and Republicans sitting side by side checking signatures, opening envelopes, and watching the tabulation machines. To rig a national election, you would need thousands of registered Republicans and thousands of registered Democrats to secretly hold hands, agree to commit a federal felony, and keep their mouths shut forever and a day. In a country where politicians can't even keep a private text message from leaking to the press, that kind of flawless, massive conspiracy is a mathematical fantasy. There are no rigged elections on a national level. Unlike the past, the vast majority of Americans now vote using paper ballots or machines that print a verifiable paper. You can hack a computer screen, but you cannot hack a physical piece of paper sitting in a locked canvas bag. When audits and hand recounts happen, they check the paper. So when someone tells you the entire national election is mapped out and rigged from top to bottom, They don't understand how the system works. The system is too decentralized, too fragmented, and too heavily scrutinized to be stolen on a grand scale. Let me say it again. The election system is too decentralized, too fragmented, and too heavily scrutinized to be stolen or rigged on a national scale. But here's the catch, and this brings us back to why we're here. While they cannot rig the election, they can exploit a narrow margin. They don't need a massive nationwide conspiracy if a race comes down to less than 500 votes in one specific county. If the race is a tie, then a single broken machine, a single partisan judge, or a single batch of delayed mail-in ballots can accidentally flip the destiny of the free world. That is why the national conspiracy theory is a trap. It makes you feel powerless against a ghost in the machine, while the real danger is just a low turnout, razor-thin margins. We don't defeat a grand national pot. We defeat the mathematical vulnerability of a close race. Now, I know what the cynics say when they look at California or read the history books. They look at Spencer Pratt falling behind days after the polls close, and they say, why bother? What's the point? The deck is stacked. The game is fixed. My votes don't count anyway. Listen to me carefully. That cynicism is exactly what a corrupt establishment wants you to feel. That's exactly what Donald Trump is hollering about right now. A corrupt election. He says it long enough, he says it hard enough, people are going to believe it. But it's just not possible on a national level. It's just not possible. Hold on. Let me play this.
That could have Donald Trump win California. It would only be a completely crooked vote counter that could have Donald Trump win California. Donald Trump is profoundly unpopular in California, and that is part of the reason why he is targeting it. He cannot believe, he cannot abide, he cannot rationalize in his world why the people of California, one of the most innovative states in the country, one of the most successful states in the country, one of the most vibrant states in the country, he cannot accept that over and over and over again they reject him. Their governor mocks him on social media. When Donald Trump tried to rig the House map by getting Texas to redistrict 5 more seats, it was California that met him in kind. And even worse for him, he suffered the humiliation that was done by the people of California through popular vote.
So, cynicism is the ultimate form of voter suppression. If they can convince you that your voice is meaningless, you stay home. And if you stay home, you make their job incredibly easy. A low voter turnout election is a highly predictable election. A predictable election is an easily managed or manipulated election. Your apathy is their oxygen. Your despair is their power. The moment you buy into the lie that it's all rigged anyway, so why even vote, you have surrendered a single shot being fired. We defy the cynicism not by retreating, but by flooding the gates. We don't throw up our hands. We show up in numbers. We have to show up in numbers that they have never seen before. We overwhelm the ballot boxes. We saturate the precincts. We turn out the disaffected, the forgotten, and the independent. We create a human tidal wave of civic participation that washes away the shenanigans of the political class. How do we achieve a victory that is too big to fail? How do we achieve a victory that's too large? It doesn't happen by accident, and it certainly doesn't happen by just complaining on social media. It requires an unprecedented level of discipline and operational excellence. First, what that means is early and absolute mobilization of voting people. We cannot wait until the final hours of election day, hoping the weather is nice and the lines aren't too long. If you have the ability to bank your vote legally ahead of time, you do that. We need to walk into the final day of voting with a massive backlog of support already locked in so that our day of energy can be used to pull the undecided across the finish line. Second, it means swarming the process. A victory that is too big to rig means we don't just show up to vote. We show up to watch, to work, and to protect. We need an army of poll watchers and volunteers who understand the law, who are eagle-eyed and who ensure that every single legal vote is counted and every irregularity is challenged immediately. Transparency is the natural enemy of corruption. Third, it means the +3 rule. You do not go to the polls alone. You look to your left, you look to your right, and you find 3 people in your life who are leaning towards staying home. You find your cousin who thinks politics is for shit. You find your neighbor who's too busy. You find your coworker who has lost faith in the election process. You drag them to the polls. You become a force multiplier. Okay? So maybe the lesson here isn't really about Donald Trump. It's not. Maybe it's really about Spencer Pratt. Maybe it ain't even about California. Maybe the lesson is that Americans have reached a point where they no longer trust close outcomes in races. And whether you think that's justified or not, the distrust is real. When people watch candidates lead on election night and then fall behind days later, they start asking these questions. Sometimes those questions are reasonable. Sometimes they're not. But the questions are going to come regardless. This is why every political movement should stop focusing on so much energy with explaining the losses after they happen and start focusing more on preventing close losses in the first place. Because history shows us that election corruption has existed in the United States. History also shows that the election corruption can be on a large scale conspiracy, but mostly local. It's harder to pull off than people think it is. But both things can be true at the same time. But locally, yes, I could see elections being rigged, but not on a national scale, not on a whole national scale. It just doesn't happen. The reality is that the closer the race, the more room there is for suspicion, confusion, legal challenges, recounts, accusations, etc. The narrower the margin, the easier it becomes for people to believe that something went wrong. Listen to the people in California. Listen to the president. He's hollering corruption and rigged and all that good stuff. What he doesn't seem to understand is California is a blue state. It's many Democrats there. Sure, it's some Republicans. Sure, I get that. But it's more Democrats than it is Republicans. Okay? So when a candidate wins by hundreds of thousands of votes, when a movement builds support across communities, across counties, across demographic groups, the arguments get a lot harder to make about stuff being rigged. At this point, the results become too big to rig, bigger than the conspiracy theories, bigger than excuses, lawsuits, and talking points. And that's where every political movement should want to be. Not hoping a recount will save them, not hoping a judge rescues them, not hoping a late batch of ballots changes their fortune. Unfortunately, Spencer Pratt, the ballots came in, mail-in ballots, it was what it was. Okay? They should want to win so clearly that everybody knows who won before the lawyers even get involved. Because democracy is strongest when the outcome is obvious. Democracy is strongest when voters speak so loudly that nobody can honestly pretend they didn't hear them. And if you truly believe your ideas are better, if you truly believe your vision for this country is what America wants, then don't spend your time looking for reasons why you might lose. Spend your time building a coalition so big that losing becomes impossible to ignore. Because in the end, the best answer to every accusation, every rumor, every conspiracy theory, every claim of a stolen election is not another press conference. It's a margin. It's a margin too big to fail. A margin so overwhelming that the country moves forward instead of fighting about what happened. A margin so decisive that even your opponents are forced to acknowledge the reality. a margin so undeniable that the results belong to the voters and not to the commentators. That's the challenge. That's the responsibility. And that's why, in an age of this distrust, the goal cannot simply be to win an election. It has to be overwhelmingly won. And the goal has to be to win enough that the people, not the politicians, not the pundits, and not the internet, have the final word about who the winner is. So we got to show up and show up.
President Donald Trump casted doubt on the results of the LA mayoral race after the...
Hold on. We're going to see this. Listen. Go.
The leading Republican candidate saw his advantage slip away. In Los Angeles, the top two vote getters in the primary advanced to the general election, regardless of party affiliation. Last Tuesday, incumbent Mayor Karen Bass secured the top spot headed into November, but the race for second place remained too close to call, with officials counting mail-in ballots all week. Initially, Republican candidate Spencer Pratt held a narrow lead over progressive councilwoman Nithya Raymond. Trump called the election rigged as the results trickled in and Pratt fell behind Raymond. Pratt himself speculated election integrity issues, attempting to connect the population of people experiencing homelessness with a surge in votes for Raymond. The Associated Press has not yet called the mayoral race, as ballots are still being counted. Raymond holds a lead of just over 3,100 votes, with 27.1% of the ballots, compared to Pratt's 26.7% of the ballots. As of Monday morning, 83% of ballots have been counted, 6 days after the election was held. The gubernatorial race has also not yet been called, with 72% of ballots counted thus far. President Donald Trump casted.
So now they're trying to say, oh, mail-in ballots shouldn't count. Those mail-in ballots are invalid. They're rigging the election because these ballots are late. That is the way the state and the local officials have tailored their election. And it's always been tailored that way. So now they're going to try to lie about the elections. This is why it's so important for everybody to show up and for everybody to vote. So it would be so overwhelming that you can't deny it. That anything that happens in any of these elections, you cannot deny. No razor thin margins, no any of those. It has to be decisive. Texas has to be decisive. Maine has to be decisive. Iowa has to be decisive. All of these places have to be decisive. For these people to get it, for these people to understand that their ideas, that their policies, that their way of life, the way they want to take the United States is unsustainable. It's unimaginable, un-American, unpatriotic. It has to be overwhelming that they are rejected. And it cannot just be, oh, well, Donald Trump's poll numbers are bad. No, it has to be the whole Republican Party, because they walk and they move in lockstep. It has to be a total and complete rejection of that. Okay? A total and complete rejection of that whole philosophy, that whole ideology. And we got to do it this November. Everybody needs to be registered to vote. Everybody needs to be make sure they're on the voter rolls, make sure their names are correct, make sure family members are registered, make sure everybody makes it to the polls before Tuesday. Before that Tuesday. If you're able to vote before that Tuesday, please vote before that Tuesday. This has to be an overwhelming rejection of the direction that this country is going in. Because the direction that this country is going in, most people are rejecting it. Most people are rejecting. When you have 10 things on the table and I reject 5, it has to be overwhelming. Overwhelming. So hopefully we have elections this November that are too big to rig, where you cannot deny it, cannot be denied, cannot be changed, cannot be altered, cannot be manipulated. This is what we're hoping. That people come out, vote, everybody's registered, voter purging, all of the things that are historically on the Republican side of them doing to stop Democrats from voting, they're doing now. Changing the voter rolls, kicking people off rolls, telling people they have to sign up here, shortening the hours to vote, making the hours impossible for people to vote. Everything that has been manipulated historically to stop people from voting, the Republicans always do every election cycle. But this specific election cycle, they're doing it overwhelmingly. So right now, we have to make sure that we're diligent and we're staying positive about this race, staying on par with when we have to vote, making sure that we're not busy on that day, making sure we're voting early. We want all of these things in place before November comes along, because we want this race. We want all the races to be too big to rig. Nobody can say they're rigged. Nobody can say that it's some kind of foolery, shenanigans, you name it, because the Republicans always pull shenanigans. They always pull bullshit out of their hat. Days, weeks, months, the day of election, with it being voter fraud. Donald Trump is pulling it now. He's upset. He's just devastated because he understands. If you're looking at the internal polls, if you're looking at any internal polling with Donald Trump, you understand the devastation of how much the Republicans are going to lose. If you read data, if you read the internal polls, all of the polls are saying Donald Trump's poll numbers are in the toilet. All of them. And with him he's primarily on the ballot. He is the person that's on the ballot. Even though he's not on the ballot, he is on the ballot. And people are judging what's happening in this world to our country, to what he has done to the country. We're not talking about Joe Biden, because it ain't Joe Biden. This is all Donald Trump. Everything that has come to be in this country is because of the decisions that this president has made, taking this country the way that he has taken this country. Taking this country from a respected and honorable position in the world to where we are now, where people laugh and joke, and you can see it all over TikTok, you see it all over every social media, where other countries are saying, we don't even believe y'all voted for that person to be y'all president. But it is what it is. Now we're going to be diligent. Now we're going to make sure that these elections are too big to fail, too big to rig, too big to say, no, it's rigged. It's a fake election. But see, this is how Donald Trump has been doing since he's been on the scene, since he's been in politics for the last 10 years. He has sought to undermine our election process. Nobody on the national stage has talked about rigging elections like Donald Trump. And then you have goofy people that stand behind him. Never in the history have we heard of elections being rigged, elections having problems, elections having any kind of issues until this president came on the scene. So I author him with bringing the cynicism and the issues into our election process. This is the person that brought it to national attention. This is the person that brought it before. This is the person that's saying elections are rigged. No other president has ever said it. No other president has ever said it. No one ever said it. No one had a big enough microphone beforehand, except Donald Trump is the one who introduced this chaos and headache and heartbreak and cynicism into our election process. He was the first one to do it. He's the only person that does do it. He says it every time he opens his mouth. And this is the president of the United States. And this is why we have become a laughing stock across the national and international stage, because of the things that this president has said about elections, the whole nine. The election wasn't rigged when he won. The election didn't have election fraud when he won. It only has election fraud when the elections and the outcomes of what he doesn't want. It's always election. It's always something weird when it's something he doesn't want. Nobody said anything about elections being rigged or wrong or catastrophic or anything. But nobody said anything about lying and cheating and stealing and all that good stuff until after that president got into office. And it's always about what the Democrats do. When it's clear, when it should be clear to all who is listening, all who are watching, that the gerrymandering, the lying, the cheating, the stealing, the election fraud, the unqualified candidates, the unqualified cabinet member, that they're going to try to do whatever they need to do in order to discourage people from voting, shortening voting hours, kicking people off the rolls, making all of these things. These are Republican playbooks. This is Republican activities. Democrats don't do this kind of stuff when they get in office. They don't start purging rolls. They don't start shortening hours. They don't start kicking people off the voter roll for inhumane or inconsequential thing. Democrats don't do that. This is all things that Republicans do because they know overwhelmingly that their ideas, their policies are unpopular and they don't forward the American people. They understand that. This is why they want to cheat. This is why they want to say elections are rigged. We just have to make it too big for them to rig. That's all. We just have to make it. Thank you, Prairie Ben. Thank you. I think so too. Thank you. So this is what we have to do. Vote overwhelmingly. I don't care who you vote for. I just want you to vote overwhelmingly so it will be decisive. So you cannot come back 2 or 3 days later and say, "Oh, the mail-in ballots. No, we don't believe in mail-in ballots. We want to invalidate the mail-in ballot." No, we don't want to do that. We want everyone to vote, be overwhelming, so people can't say anything about the voters, anything about the ballots. The ballots are legitimate. This is what we want. Okay, vote Republican, vote Democrat. I don't care who you vote for, as long as it's overwhelming. Okay. So if you like my content, please hit a like, share, and subscribe. I'd appreciate it. We have content coming back tonight at 10 p.m. Please be back at that time. And I will appreciate all of the likes and the shares and the comments. And I will see you in the next video tonight at 10 o'clock. I appreciate all of you guys. Appreciate you guys. I appreciate it.